Every summer, my best friend, whom we'll call Maria, and I hung out at this resort. We each had our own hotel room that we shared together. One night, when we were 11 years old, Maria suggested that we go ghost hunting. I didn't have a great feeling about it, so I said, I don't really think we should go. Let's just stay inside and play games. But Maria insisted, saying, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. I'll play with you every day this summer if you go with me." Stupidly, I agreed. And we put our clothes, grabbed flashlights, and all that stuff. We went to the convenience shop in the resort to get a few sodas, and then that's when I saw her. Behind the register stood the most terrifying woman I had ever seen. My face went pale, and then she disappeared. As we were walking out, Maria noticed my pale face and asked, "Why?" I told her everything, expecting her to be concerned, but to my surprise, she seemed happy. At that moment, I thought, what's wrong with this idiot? Nevertheless, she dragged me to the lobby to investigate. While I sat in the seat, already traumatized by the incident in the convenience store. As I was getting my phone from my purse, I noticed a red stain on my sundress. I thought it was ketchup from the buffet we had, so I shook it off. A few minutes later, I heard the most blood-curdling scream coming from the elevator. I don't think anyone else heard it since there was no one else around, and the night shift employee was fast asleep. It sounded like it was coming from the elevator hall. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. The screaming grew louder and louder, causing my eardrums to feel like they were bleeding. I opened one of the doors and found a musty-looking man in his 40s, holding a knife to Maria's throat. In a panic, he grabbed me and whispered, "I have a thing for Japanese girls." I'm actually Korean, but that didn't matter. I bit him and kicked his crotch, freeing Maria from his grip. We quickly ran back to our room and called the resort security. Thankfully, the man was arrested, but we were left absolutely traumatized. I'm now 13, and I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard Maria or found the right elevator.
I work at a small grocery store. The owner of the store was a man named Randy, and one day he told me a strange story. 20 years ago, Randy worked at a grocery store in the same neighborhood. Back then, there was a coworker named Curtis, and the two became friends as they worked together. One day, Curtis confessed that he had murdered someone before, and when Randy scoffed at him, thinking it was a joke, Curtis said it is true, and he doesn't get arrested by the police, even if he kills people. So when Randy told him to stop joking, Curtis said he would prove it. One day, while the two were looking for a target, they found a man walking alone in the alley, and Curtis abducted and murdered him. Randy said this is all he knows. He said he has no idea what Curtis did to the man. After a while, a man in the neighborhood was reported missing. The police broke in and interrogated Curtis, but there was no evidence against him. So Randy kept asking Curtis how he did that, but he didn't tell him anything. After all, time passed by and Randy felt a sense of guilt. However, he didn't have the courage to report the incident because if he does, he would make himself an accomplice. Randy told me it has already been 20 years, warning me to always watch out for him. It is hard for me to believe what he said. I just thought he made up a story. Then one day, a man named Curtis walked into our store. Randy greeted Curtis and introduced him to me. I felt a sense of uneasiness. He was that He was an average-looking man. He was rather kind to me. Curtis greeted me with a relaxed face. After a while Randy was away, I asked Curtis, "Hey, there is something that Randy told me. Is it true?" Curtis suddenly stiffened and asked what I'm talking about. I hesitantly said, 20 years ago. Then Curtis cut me off, saying, "Oh, of course that's a made-up story. Does that make sense?" Then he got up from his seat with a grave face. After a while, On his way out of the store, he said, "Would you like some candy?"
When I was in 12th grade, I joined an a cappella competition with 6 of my friends, 3 girls and 5 boys. It was 4:30 in the afternoon, and our mentor decided that we should go to the music room to practice our vocals since the competition would be the next day. We had been studying in that school for almost 2 years, but we had never entered that room before. As we entered the room, the first thing I noticed was the piano located near the door. It was quite old, as were the other guitars stored in the corner of the room.
Andy, stop staring at the piano. It's an old piano. You won't be able to play it.
He went to the piano and pressed the keys to prove that it wasn't making any sound. I just nodded at him and followed his orders during practice. We all blended so well, following his instructions. An hour later, there was a beep from his phone.
Guys, there's an emergency. I'll just have to go downstairs for a bit. Wait for me, don't touch anything,
he instructed. We all nodded, and he left the room. Sitting on the floor, we started chatting about the strategies we would use for the competition. A few minutes later, my friend Eric said something unrelated.
Damn, I need to pee bad,
and ran towards the door, shouting,
"Don't leave me!"
Before shutting it, we continued chatting and the conversation became more interesting. I didn't even notice when Eric returned to the room. In the middle of our conversation, we all heard the piano playing. I became annoyed, thinking that one of them was playing it.
"Hey, stop it! Sir might kill us,"
I scolded. Then we realized that the piano was broken and hadn't made any sound earlier. We looked at the piano, and it was playing on its own. We were all frozen in place, shaking to our core. I stood behind my other friend, trembling, and we all decided to exit through the door. My friend Eric was panicking so badly that he couldn't open the door at first. My other friend Trina took over and quickly opened the door. We ran downstairs to tell our mentor what had happened. "Sir, the piano was playing on its own," I cried. He was in shock and decided to send us home to rest instead of continuing the practice. The next day, we found out that a nun had died in that room, and she was musically inclined. Our mentor joked that she was just trying to help us, but it wasn't a funny experience for us. We hadn't seen a nun playing, but witnessing a piano playing its keys was terrifying.
One night while I was sleeping, I suddenly woke up with goosebumps. Looking around, there was something gigantic outside the window, blocking the moonlight. I was startled and looked at it closely. Outside the window, a very large face was staring at me. It was 3 times the size of a human's face, and its skin color was pitch black, and it was smiling broadly. I jumped out of bed in surprise. What was even more shocking was that I was on the 2nd floor. A human couldn't be that big. I shouted as I trembled, "The police!" I couldn't say a thing. After a while, it slowly moved away. It was smiling and staring at me as it walked away. Its eyes paralyzed my whole body, and I couldn't move. When it was far away, I finally could see its body. It was a huge giant that looked as if it was 12 feet tall. The length of its legs looked like a telephone pole. I froze on the spot, watching the scene. What the hell was that? Is this a dream? But despite how many times I pinched on my trembling thighs, I realized it wasn't a dream. Who the hell was he? I had big doubts. and I went around asking people in the neighborhood if anyone had seen him. Among them, there was an old lady who was over 80 years old, and she said to me with a very surprised expression,
He's back? I'd seen him when I was about 30. After the giant came, people in the village started to die. When I was little, my parents told me that there is a giant that appears in town, but I didn't believe it. But he appeared again. Soon, there'll be successive deaths in this village.
After that day, the people really started dying in the village, but the people who died were all troublemakers. Bullies who stole other people's money, people who committed adultery, and scammers, etc. Dozens of people have died mysterious deaths with unknown causes. All of them were found overnight with their bodies compressed into tiny balls, but the police and doctors couldn't find any exact evidence why they died like that. All the people in the village were seized with great fear. Then one day, while I was sleeping again, a loud voice resonated throughout my room, as if a cave.
I come to clean up this town every 50 years. Rogue humans cause damage to humanity, so they must be periodically disposed of. Fortunately, you are not a defective product. Keep on living a life of virtue.
And at the window, the giant was smiling again. I shuddered in fear, but with the heavy thud of his footsteps, he slowly drifted away, and I haven't heard his voice since then. All the people in the village trembled in fear, but after a few days, there was no one who died. All the villagers gathered around and said he would come again later on, and that they should prepare for that. Even at this moment, I'm really afraid. Will he really appear again after 50 years? If so, should I leave this town? If I leave this place, will I be free from his judgment?